In the ocean's depths, danger lurks where you least expect it. From sharks lurking in quiet coves to predatory strikes in crystal-clear waters, these stories of unexpected attacks will keep you on edge. Join us as we dive into the terrifying, high-stakes encounters of those who faced nature's raw, untamed power and live to tell the tale. Brace yourself. The ocean's dark secrets are waiting. The morning sun burned hot over the restless waters off the coast of Gansbai, South Africa, a place known for its haunting beauty and apex predators. Beneath the rolling waves, Chloe Roberts, a 33-year-old experienced diver from Cape Town, moved with practiced ease. Diving had been her passion for over a decade. She was calm in the deep, always searching, always observing. Slim, athletic, with sharp green eyes that had seen the ocean's darkest secrets, Chloe was in her element. This dive had started like any other. The currents were steady, the water was cool against her wetsuit, and the visibility stretched clear and sharp in every direction. Around her, schools of fish shimmered like liquid metal, weaving between the jagged spires of rock rising from the ocean floor. She adjusted her buoyancy, drifting lower, mesmerized by the life teeming around her. Her breathing was slow and even. Every detail of the underwater world seemed magnified. But beneath that beauty, the deep always held shadows. Chloe didn't see the shark at first. A 20-foot great white patrolled its kingdom beyond the reef's edge. Massive, ancient, and powerful, the predator moved silently through the water. It was not hunting, not yet. Its black eyes scanned the deep automatically, a creature driven by instinct and raw power. Chloe swam further from her group, following a curious formation of rocks and kelp. Her heartbeat was steady, focused only on the world before her. But as she drifted through a narrow gap between two outcrops, she didn't realize how quickly the world behind her changed. The shark was closing in. It hadn't seen her at first either. But now, as Chloe rounded the rocky bend, she swam straight into its path. 20 feet of muscle and scarred white belly loomed before her like a living wall. For a fraction of a second, both human and predator were caught in mutual shock, neither expecting the other. The shark reacted first. It lunged with a quick move, driven not by hunger but surprise. Its snout struck Chloe square in the chest, a brutal head-on collision that sent her tumbling backward through the water. The world was flipped upside down. The impact knocked the regulator partially from her mouth. The taste of salt water burned her throat. Her vision blurred. The force left her dizzy, her limbs briefly paralyzed by the animal's raw power. As her vision cleared, horror swallowed her. The shark was turning. Its enormous body twisted with impossible grace for something so large. Its mouth opened wide, rows of jagged teeth spreading into a cavern of death. The dark pits of its eyes locked onto her. The jaws came fast, too fast, aiming straight for her head. She kicked with every ounce of strength she had. Her fins lashed out wildly, driving her sideways as the mouth closed. The razor teeth missed her skull by inches but found skin instead. An explosion of pain tore across her face and shoulder as the teeth grazed her, peeling back flesh like wet paper. Blood clouded the water. Adrenaline surged through Chloe's body like fire. She twisted again, forcing herself away from the monster. The shark's momentum carried it past her, but only just. It banked sharply, its tail cutting a violent arc through the blue. Chloe's mind screamed at her to move. The surface felt impossibly far away. Every second felt stretched and distorted. She kicked hard, ignoring the searing pain in her shoulder. Her wetsuit was torn. Blood poured from the long gashes across her face and arm, trailing behind her like a beacon in the water. The shark circled. It had tasted blood now. Its instincts were fully awake. The injury was minor to the large animal, but the scent triggered something primal. Chloe pushed herself harder than she ever had. Her limbs felt heavy. The pressure of the deep clutched at her like hands trying to drag her down. But survival overrode fear. She angled upward, kicking for the thin shimmer of light high above. The shark moved again. It was closing the distance, faster this time, more deliberate. Each movement of its tail sent it rocketing closer to her vulnerable form. Chloe could feel it in her bones, the death that chased her. She refused to look back. Looking back would slow her down. Above, shadows moved. Two other divers, part of her group, and had seen the blood rising like smoke through the water. They were already swimming hard toward her, desperate, terrified. One of them, Nick, a veteran diver who was built like a swimmer, reached her first. He grabbed the strap of her gear and yanked her upward with brutal force. Below them, the shark came on. Nick kicked furiously, dragging Chloe along with him. Another diver, Maria, reached them too, thrusting the butt of a GoPro stick toward the shark. A useless barrier against such a creature, but a desperate gesture nonetheless. The shark closed in. It passed so close beneath Chloe that she could see the scars on its snout, the rough patches of its pale underbelly, the endless rows of teeth ready to clamp shut. But it hesitated, just for a second, confused by the movement, the strange shapes above. That second saved her life. The divers broke the surface in a violent rush. Shouts filled the air. Arms reached for Chloe, dragging her onto the waiting boat. Blood poured from her wounds, mixing with seawater that streamed from her gear and hair. The ache in her shoulder was blinding. Her face throbbed with raw open wounds, but she was alive. The shark sank back into the deep, disappearing as silently as it had arrived. On the deck, Chloe sat shaking, teeth clenched against the pain. Her wetsuit was shredded across one shoulder. Her face bore the raw signature of the great white's near-fatal curiosity, a brutal reminder of the thin line between life and death in the ocean. In the days that followed, as stitches pulled her skin back together and the bruises darkened beneath her eyes, Chloe Roberts changed. She had stared death in the face and survived. But more than that, she understood the creature that had almost killed her. Not a monster, but a predator following instinct. In time, her scars became symbols of survival. She would go on to tell her story not as a tale of terror, but as a lesson, a call for safer diving, respect of the wild, and protection of the creatures that ruled the deep long before humans ever entered it. In 2016, Elena Rodriguez, a 38-year-old marketing consultant from San Diego, had traveled to Guadalupe Island, off the wild, rugged coast of Baja California, Mexico, chasing a dream she had held for years, to swim freely with great white sharks in their natural habitat, untethered, unprotected, face-to-face with one of the ocean's most feared predators, believing in her heart that raw courage could somehow overcome the cold, indifferent power of nature. However, she was little more than a novice in the world of diving, with only a handful of dives in calm, shallow waters behind her, and none that came even close to the danger she was now willingly embracing. The sun had risen high over the rolling Pacific that morning, its sharp glare reflecting in broken waves around the dive boat as the crew prepared the group for their descent. The professional guides were stern-faced and clear in their warnings, explaining once again how Guadalupe Island was unlike any other place in the world, a deep-water hunting ground for the largest great whites on the planet, their movements swift, their ambushes silent, their power beyond anything most divers could imagine. While the cages provided safety, protection, and a boundary between human fragility and the ocean's most perfected predator, Elena wanted none. Driven by stubbornness, pride, and a desperate thirst for an encounter so raw it would burn in her memory forever, she had insisted on diving without the cage, brushing off the guide's caution with a nervous laugh, certain that staying calm and respecting the animal would be enough, even as the currents beneath the boat stirred stronger than expected, pulling and shifting with unseen force, a reminder that she was a visitor in a world she could neither control nor fully understand. The group entered the water in cautious pairs, their bright wetsuits and oxygen tanks glinting like tiny sparks in the endless blue. They drifted near the boat where the cages hung like steel shadows, their bars thick and unforgiving. The deeper water beyond stretched into an empty, beckoning darkness, beautiful and terrible all at once. Elena, separate from the others by choice, swam ahead with long, eager strokes, the water enveloping her completely, the only sounds her steady breathing and the faint crackle of distant bubbles as she pushed further, her movements quick and uneven, small bursts of energy that scattered fish and sent curious glances from other divers, but far below and beyond them, it caught the attention of something else, something far older and infinitely more dangerous. A great white shark, nearly 18 feet long, its bulk graceful and deadly, its body scarred from years of survival, had been circling the edges of the activity, calm, measured, uninterested in the dull clang of cages or the distant scent of chum, until that unmistakable flicker of weakness, frantic movement isolated from the group, vulnerable, pulled it from the shadows, driving it upward. It zeroed in on Elena as she hovered in the open water, still oblivious to the doom racing toward her from the depths below. The first strike happened so fast that many of the divers' onlookers were left frozen in shock, their hearts slamming in their chests as they stared through their masks at the violent blur of motion erupting beneath Elena, a flash of gray and white exploding upward like a torpedo, its enormous jaws opening in an arc so wide it seemed impossible, rows of serrated teeth catching the light for a fraction of a second before slamming shut against her right leg, crushing flesh and bone with astonishing force as Elena's body twisted violently, a cloud of dark blood bursting outward like ink, staining the clear blue in horrifying contrast. Dragged downward in an instant, she thrashed in pure panic, bubbles pouring from her mouth in frantic bursts as she fought against the crushing pull of the animal, now driving her beneath the surface, her arms flailing helplessly, the pain from her shredded limb collapsing into numb terror as the pressure increased. Her body hauled deeper, faster, wrapped in the brutal grip of the predator whose black eyes reflected nothing but ancient hunger and primal dominance. The group above was no longer moving. They could only watch in horror as Elena disappeared beneath the surface, a trail of blood rising steadily in her wake, broken pieces of her fin drifting upward like ghostly debris. At the same time, the shark adjusted its grip, shaking her violently once, twice, the raw power of its movement rippling through the water, as though she were no more than a rag doll in its jaws, before releasing her suddenly, letting her body float limply for a moment, drifting downward in a slow, almost peaceful spiral. But the peace was deceptive and short-lived, for the shark returned almost immediately, surging in again, this time clamping down across her torso in a brutal bite that sent another cloud of red spinning outward, the soundless violence of the moment playing out like a nightmare beneath the waves, her body buckling under the crushing force as the predator shook her side to side with horrifying strength, bones snapping beneath the pressure, wetsuit torn and shredded like paper, until finally the shark released her for good, turning away with a final flick of its enormous tail, disappearing into the dark void from which it had come, leaving behind only silence, blood, and stillness. Elena's body floated upward slowly, her limbs loose, her mask cracked, her life already long gone. When the guides finally reached her, gently pulling her broken form back toward the surface, nothing was left to be done but to bring her home and retrieve what the ocean had not claimed completely. At the same time, overhead, the crew scrambled to end the dive. Waves now splashed red. The dream of swimming freely with the great whites shattered forever. In the hours that followed, the shock and grief hung heavy over the boat, as the realization of what had happened settled like a weight on every heart aboard. The surviving divers sitting in stunned silence, haunted by the image of Elena's final moments, of her struggle against the raw, unstoppable force of nature. And though rescue teams arrived and recovered what remained of her body, the legacy of her death stretched far beyond that day, sparking an immediate ban on unprotected dives in the waters of Guadalupe, forcing tour companies to confront the dangers they had perhaps allowed themselves to forget, and pushing new, stricter safety measures into place to ensure that never again would a diver face the sea's oldest predator alone, unguarded, and unprepared. The afternoon sun burned high above the turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean, its heat harsh and unforgiving, as Leo Koivisto, a 34-year-old Finnish software developer on vacation, clung desperately to a piece of shattered debris from the catamaran that only hours earlier had carried him and 7 other tourists on what was meant to be a peaceful day of sailing near the Seychelles. The boat, sleek and white against the endless sea, had been no match for the squall that struck out of the blue, battering the vessel with towering waves until its hull cracked apart, pitching its passengers violently into open water, leaving them scattered and helpless against the vast, restless ocean, stretching out endlessly around them. Leo had always been drawn to travel to remote places far from the rigid predictability of his quiet life back home in Helsinki. But floating alone beneath the empty sky, the distant cries of his fellow passengers barely reaching him over the rhythmic slap of waves, he felt a different kind of isolation settle in, colder, heavier, more primal, the kind born not from solitude but from the immediate, suffocating presence of danger. That danger revealed itself moments later, when the faint outline of an oceanic whitetip shark emerged from the deep blue beneath him, its broad pectoral fins stretched wide like wings, its slow, circling movement unnaturally calm. A creature evolved over millions of years to patrol these forgotten stretches of water, merciless and patient. Oceanic whitetips were notorious in these parts. Scavengers, opportunists, predators of shipwreck survivors and those unlucky enough to be caught adrift far from shore. And even as Leo's heartbeat surged, the others huddled together in a tight group some distance away, their frantic splashes and shouted warnings lost in the space between them. At the same time, Leo's separation had become a silent invitation. The shark circle tightened gradually, each pass drawing nearer, its pale belly flashing faintly beneath the surface, its dark eyes fixed with unsettling focus on Leo's kicking legs and bleeding scrapes from where the catamaran's wreckage had cut him during the chaos. There was no doubt in Leo's mind what was about to happen, but the first explosive strike still came faster than thought, the shark's jaws opening wide, its teeth like jagged rows of white glass locking around Leo's left thigh in a brutal, twisting grip. The force of the bite tore him from the surface in an instant, yanking him downward in a violent rush of bubbles and blood. The pressure in his ears building sharply as the water closed overhead, the world narrowing to a haze of red and the crushing agony radiating from his leg where flesh and muscle tore under the shark's relentless pull. Leo thrashed with every ounce of strength he could summon, his free leg kicking wildly, hands clawing at the rough skin of the shark's head, the sensation of its sandpaper hide burning across his palms as he fought not only for freedom but for the primal need to breathe. Above him, the surface shimmered like a distant, unreachable sky. Still, some desperate surge of adrenaline drove him to fight harder, lashing out with his fists, jabbing at the sensitive area near the predator's gills and eyes, every blow fueled by the raw terror flooding his veins, until the shark released him with sudden, chilling ease, its body twisting away into the bloody murk it had created. Leo kicked upward frantically, lungs screaming, his vision narrowing as the sunlight fractured above him, pulling himself toward life with nothing left but instinct. Breaking the surface felt like shattering glass, his first ragged gasp of air a mixture of salt water and blood. The pain in his leg unbearable, his body weak and trembling as he realized he was drifting further from the safety of the group. Their horrified faces turned toward him, arms waving frantically toward a distant boat approaching fast. Drawn by the growing commotion and the unmistakable slick of blood spreading across the surface in cruel, widening streaks. The shark had not gone far. Its dark shadow reappeared beneath him, its movements more direct now, driven not just by curiosity but by the taste of blood and the thrill of the hunt. Leo's battered body barely responded as he splashed weakly, trying to appear larger, trying to fight the growing weight of exhaustion that dragged at his limbs. At the same time, the boat's engine roared closer, slicing across the water toward him with desperate speed. The crew acted without hesitation. A rescue line sliced through the air, landing dangerously close, and Leo forced his shaking arms to seize it. His numbed fingers barely managed to grip the coarse rope as strong hands hauled him toward salvation. The shark made one final pass beneath him, its looming form a haunting silhouette against the fractured light. But the aggravating noise, the thrash of propellers, and the flurry of movement drove it back into the depths, vanishing as quickly as it had come. Leo's body, slick with blood and seawater, was dragged aboard, his injured leg a grotesque mess of shredded flesh and torn muscle. The crew working feverishly to stem the bleeding, their hands pressing into the wounds. At the same time, voices shouted instructions and calls for medical assistance crackled over radios. Every breath burned, every second stretched impossibly long, but Leo was alive, his heart hammering against his ribs as the realization of what had happened settled heavily over him. Later, long after the chaos had passed, after he had been stabilized and his wounds stitched and dressed in the sterile calm of a hospital, Leo would stare out over the vast, endless sea, feeling the phantom ache of teeth in his flesh, haunted not only by the memory of the shark's eyes or the searing pain of its bite, but by the brutal knowledge of how fragile life could become in the space of a single heartbeat. And though he had survived, he knew its shadow would never leave him. The afternoon sun hung lazily over the calm waters of the Bahamas, casting shimmering patterns on the surface where 34-year-old Lena Hoffman moved slowly, enjoying the cool relief from the tropical heat. Originally from Hamburg, Germany, Lena had built her life around the ocean, working as a dive instructor on the islands for several years. She was known for her calm confidence in the water, deep respect for marine life, and belief that sharks, misunderstood and often demonized, posed little threat if approached with care and knowledge. But that afternoon, wading waist-deep near a busy marina on New Providence Island, Lena's ease would turn fatally fragile. The marina, though picturesque, was no stranger to sharks. Fishing boats came and went daily, many casually dumping scraps into the sea, conditioning local predators to associate the shallows with easy food. Lena knew this. She'd warned students about it often enough. But the afternoon was quiet, the water clear, the sky a brilliant blue without a trace of menace. She hadn't brought fins or gear, just slipped into the water for a relaxing swim after a long morning with clients. The decision seemed harmless. The risk seemed distant. But a large bull shark was already circling beneath that glassy surface, moving with slow, deliberate passes just beyond the shifting light. It was an impressive female, nearly 8 feet long, driven into the shallows by the smell of fish remains drifting from the marina. Bull sharks were notorious for their aggression, boldness, and hunting in murky water where other sharks hesitated. They were unpredictable, built like submerged battering rams with thick bodies, blunt snouts, and teeth designed to shear through bone and flesh. In this shark's world, scraps from the docks meant food, and Lena's slow-moving silhouette, upright, bare-legged, splashing gently, triggered a primal response. One moment Lena felt nothing more than the subtle push and pull of the tide against her body, and the next she felt a crushing, sickening pressure clamp down around her lower leg, as if a vice of steel had closed over her flesh and bone. The bull shark struck from below and slightly behind, its jaws locking onto her right calf with ease, its weight and force jerking her sideways with a violent pull that sent a plume of blood swirling instantly into the clear shallows. Pain, unlike anything Lena had ever known, exploded up her leg and into her spine. Still, instinct overtook thought, driving her to twist and fight, her hands thrashing against the water, her body lurching toward the shore with desperate energy. The shark's grip tightened with every movement, its serrated teeth sawing deeper as Lena kicked frantically with her free leg, sending splashes high into the air as screams tore from her throat, raw and panicked. The shark thrashed its head once, trying to drag her further out, the sand beneath her feet giving way as her body was pulled toward deeper water, her world narrowing to the unbearable pressure on her leg and the chaos of water frothing with blood and terror. On the shore, the scene was instant pandemonium. Beachgoers bolted to the water's edge, some frozen in horror, others rushing forward, shouting for help. A nearby fishing boat, moored only yards away, sprang into action. The crew members, hardened by years at sea, grabbed long wooden poles, gaffs, and anything they could reach, leaping aboard their vessel and pushing off from the dock in seconds. They knew the risks of these waters better than anyone, and immediately understood what was happening. Lena's vision blurred with pain, her strength fading, the shark's pull relentless as it began to shake its horrifying head side to side, trying to tear loose a piece of her leg. The shock of it all left her barely conscious of the world above the surface. The shouts, the running feet, the boat now powering toward her. But her hands kept moving, grabbing at anything, clawing toward the sand even as the water churned red around her waist. The boat reached her in seconds that felt like an eternity. Long poles stabbed into the water near the shark's head, prodding, jabbing, striking with brutal force to break its grip. The bull shark resisted at first, holding Lena's leg in its terrible jaws. However, repeated blows to its snout and gills finally forced it to release, its dark body twisting away in a flash of muscle before disappearing into the deeper water beyond. The crew hauled Lena from the bloodied sea with rough urgency, her body trembling uncontrollably, her leg a ruined mess of torn skin, exposed muscle, and deep, ragged wounds that poured blood onto the boat's deck as they raced for shore. Lena drifted in and out of consciousness, her pale face slick with seawater and sweat, her hands shaking from the adrenaline and shock flooding her system. Emergency crews were waiting by the time the boat reached the marina, locals already spreading word of the rare but horrific attack. Medics worked quickly, clamping arteries, applying pressure, and fighting to keep her stable as they rushed her to the nearest hospital. Hours later, after emergency surgery that lasted deep into the night, Lena's leg remained intact. A miracle, the doctors would later say, given the severity of her injuries and the power of the shark that had nearly taken her. Recovery would be long and brutal, a test not only of her body but of her mind, as the flashbacks and terror of those moments haunted her with quiet, unforgiving clarity. In the days that followed, the attack became the talk of the island, not just because it had happened so close to shore, but because it had occurred to Lena, the experienced dive instructor who had always seemed so in control of the sea. The locals, while shaken, were not surprised. They had warned often enough that the waters near the marina were not a place for casual swims, especially when the scent of fish waste clung to the tides. But for Lena, the lesson had been learned in blood, etched into memory by pain, fear, and the haunting realization that some mistakes come with a price no amount of caution can undo. Every scar told a story, and hers whispered a warning she would never forget. Anastasia Vetrov had always loved the ocean. At 26 years old, she carried herself with calm confidence from years of swimming in lakes, rivers, and seas back home in Russia. The honeymoon in Mauritius had been a dream come true. A quiet escape with her husband, Roman, after the whirlwind of their wedding. The warm sun, the calm turquoise waters, and the picture-perfect cove seemed worlds away from the cold streets of Moscow. That afternoon in 2013, the beach near their resort felt almost deserted. A secluded paradise where the hours drifted by slowly beneath a cloudless sky. Roman stayed on shore, stretched out on a towel with his camera, occasionally raising it to snap pictures of his wife as she moved further from the shore, her snorkel breaking the sea's glassy surface. Anastasia was relaxed, floating effortlessly, watching the sunlight ripple over the sandy seabed and the occasional flash of a fish darting beneath her. She had ventured farther than most tourists dared, away from the laughter and chatter of the shallow shallows, beyond the buoys that bobbed gently with the current. The water grew deeper beneath her, the color darkening almost imperceptibly as the cove sloped downward, a gradient of blue that felt peaceful rather than ominous. Unbeknownst to her, the area had been subject to quiet complaints from locals for months, whispers about fishermen and boats cleaning their catches near the rocky edges, leaving behind trails of blood and scraps that vanished quickly into the currents. Few visitors noticed these warnings, and Anastasia certainly hadn't heard them. The tiger shark patrolling the area was a large female, drawn closer to the shore by the alluring scent of discarded fish parts swirling in the water hours earlier. Opportunistic by nature and aggressive in its hunting style, the shark had been gliding through the deep, lazy yet alert, its senses finely tuned to any disturbance. When Anastasia kicked again, shifting her weight to adjust her snorkel, the vibrations rippled outward, subtle, but enough to catch the shark's attention. It moved closer, the distance between predator and prey closing beneath the quiet surface. Anastasia floated, oblivious, until a shadow shifted beneath her. In the clear water there was no sound, no splash, just a shape materializing from below, monstrous and fast. The first strike was brutal. The shark rose upward and latched onto her torso and upper thigh in a devastating bite, its powerful teeth crushing down through skin, muscle, and bone with horrifying force. Anastasia's body arched violently, instinctively twisting in agony as the sharp pain tore through her. The shock froze her muscles before terror and survival instincts exploded through her system. Blood burst into the water in a thick, expanding cloud of red, drifting in ragged plumes that curled upward like smoke. The salt stung her open wounds as she tried to scream, the sound garbled through the snorkel, barely carrying over the growing splashes of her struggle. On shore, Roman saw only haphazard movement, violent thrashing far beyond what he expected from casual swimming. The shape of his wife was still visible, but smaller now, distant and frantic. Then he saw the crimson haze spreading across the perfect blue, unnatural and sickening. His heart seized in his chest with paralyzing dread. The shark twisted its body in a savage, practiced motion, dragging Anastasia downward. Her leg, gripped firmly in the animal's serrated jaws, felt like it was being crushed in a vise of bone-snapping pressure. She clawed at the water, adrenaline surging, desperate to escape, but the predator's strength was overwhelming. Her snorkel was ripped away as her head submerged again and again, water flooding into her mouth and nose between silent, panicked gasps. Beachgoers began shouting from the sand, their voices a rising chorus of alarm as they recognized what was happening. The stillness of the idyllic afternoon shattered in seconds. Reacting to the unfolding horror, lifeguards sprinted toward a nearby rescue boat, their radios crackling as they called for emergency backup. Anastasia's body was weakening as the shark shook her again, stripping away her energy and life force. Every kick she managed felt slower, her strength slipping away as shock set in. Still, she fought, twisting her free leg, striking at the unyielding bulk beside her, her arms straining for the surface, air, and life. The salt water turned metallic in her mouth as more blood spread around her, darkening the sea until it was impossible to tell where she ended, and it began. The lifeguards reached her in what felt like an eternity but had been barely minutes. They swung poles from the side of the rescue boat, battering the shark in desperate, clumsy strikes, the blows landing hard against its rough sandpaper skin. The predator, agitated now by the noise and resistance, finally released its grip, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared, its agile body slicing back into the deep. Lena's body floated limply in the water, her skin ghostly pale beneath the blood that pooled around her. Strong hands hauled her aboard, their movements practiced but frantic, faces drawn tight with urgency as they pressed towels and fabric against her wounds, trying to stop the relentless bleeding that pulsed from her torn leg and ravaged torso. Roman was barely aware of the boat's return to shore. His world narrowed to the broken shape of his wife lying before him, her breath shallow, her eyes fluttering weakly, her life draining despite their efforts. An ambulance waited on the sand, paramedics moving with cold precision as they transferred her to a stretcher, the siren beginning its mournful wail as they sped toward the hospital. But the damage had been too extensive. Anastasia's injuries, deep and catastrophic, had ravaged arteries, organs, and tissue beyond repair. She died en route, her heart finally giving way long before the hospital could save her. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the quiet resort town. News of the attack spread rapidly, sparking outrage and fear. Local authorities launched immediate investigations, and safety protocols that had long been neglected were scrutinized and overhauled. Signs were posted. Feeding near swimming areas was banned outright. Tour operators were forced to change practices. For Roman, the loss was unbearable. He had come to Mauritius to begin a life with the woman he loved, only to leave with memories stained forever by terror and grief. 11-year-old Sophie Lane had always been captivated by the mysteries of the ocean. Her room was adorned with posters of marine life, and her shelves overflowed with books about the sea's wonders. Her father, Eric, a seasoned diver with years of experience exploring underwater realms, had promised her that he would take her on her first ocean dive when she was ready. After months of training in local pools and shallow waters, the day had finally arrived. The two stood on the deck of a chartered dive boat off the coast of Monterey, California, the morning sun casting a golden hue over the calm sea. Eric meticulously checked their gear, ensuring every strap was secure and every gauge functioned properly. He was excited and anxious. This was a significant milestone for Sophie, and he wanted everything to be perfect. Sophie, clad in a slightly oversized wetsuit, her mask perched atop her head, couldn't contain her excitement. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation as she listened intently to her father's final instructions. The dive master gave them the go-ahead, and hand in hand they stepped off the boat, descending into the cool embrace of the Pacific. The underwater world unfolded in a mesmerizing display of colors and life. Schools of silvery fish darted around, while vibrant starfish clung to the rocky seabed. Sophie pointed enthusiastically at every new creature she spotted, her joy evident even through the regulator in her mouth. Eric watched her with pride, relishing this shared experience. They communicated through hand signals, with Eric guiding her deeper, vigilant and protective. Minutes into their descent, an unexpected shift in the water's ambiance occurred as they hovered near a particularly lively coral formation. The vibrant marine life seemed to retreat, and an eerie stillness settled around them. Eric felt a prickle of unease but dismissed it, focusing instead on Sophie, who was engrossed in observing a playful sea lion nearby. And the water beneath him, from the murky depths beyond their visibility, a terrifying shape materialized as quickly as lightning, cutting through a great white shark, its torpedo-like body moving with predatory grace, surged toward them. Before Eric could react, the shark collided with Sophie. In an instant, its jaws clamped onto the girl's side. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the water, and a cloud of crimson began to spread, obscuring Eric's vision. Panic surged through Eric's veins as he lunged toward his daughter, his mind racing with a cacophony of fear and desperation. He grabbed Sophie, noting the ragged tear in her wetsuit and the alarming amount of blood escaping into the water. The shark, perhaps startled by the resistance or the unfamiliar sensation, released Sophie and disappeared back into the gloom as swiftly as it had appeared. Eric's training kicked in. He secured Sophie in his grasp, her body limp and unresponsive, and began a rapid ascent toward the surface. Every kick was fueled by adrenaline, his muscles burning as he propelled them upward. The ascent seemed interminable, the surface a distant, shimmering barrier between life and death. Blood trailed behind them, a stark reminder of the urgency. Eric's mind was a whirlwind of prayers and pleas, willing his daughter to hold on. Breaking through the surface, Eric gasped for air, his cries muffled by the surrounding waves. The dive boat was already in motion, and the crew had witnessed the commotion and responded with practiced urgency. A lifebuoy was thrown, and Eric maneuvered Sophie toward it, his strength waning but his determination unwavering. Hands reached down, pulling Sophie aboard, followed swiftly by Eric. The deck became a flurry of activity. A crew member trained in emergency medical procedures assessed Sophie's injuries. A deep laceration ran along her side, the bleeding profuse. Gauze and towels were pressed firmly against the wound, the pressure aimed at staunching the flow of blood. Eric knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he stroked her damp hair, whispering words of comfort and encouragement, though terror gripped his heart. The boat sped toward the shore, the coastline a blur. Emergency services had been alerted via radio, and an ambulance awaited their arrival. Paramedics took over, and their movements were efficient and coordinated. Eric was ushered into the ambulance alongside Sophie, his hand never leaving hers. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights, his mind oscillating between hope and despair. Hours in the operating room felt like an eternity. Surgeons worked meticulously to repair the damage, and their faces were masked. Eric paced the waiting room, every minute stretching endlessly. Finally, a doctor emerged, exhaustion evident in his posture, but a reassuring smile on his face. Sophie had survived the surgery. The road to recovery would be long and arduous, but she was alive. The incident sent shockwaves through the local community and the broader diving world. Discussions about the risks of diving in areas known for shark activity intensified. Monterey, part of the infamous Red Triangle, was recognized for its significant population of great white sharks drawn by the abundant marine life. While such occurrences were rare, the reality of their possibility became starkly evident. Once an avid diver, Eric could not return to the sport. The memories were too vivid, the what-ifs too haunting. He channeled his energy into supporting Sophie through her recovery, attending physical and psychological therapy sessions, and ensuring she had every resource needed to heal. Despite the trauma, Sophie swore to return to the ocean, but never without a cage.